People think clowns are always laughing. They think we live for the silly costumes, the painted faces, the big red nose, and the laughter of children. But the truth is, under all that makeup, there's just a man who feels everything, the joy, the shame, the sting of cruel words. That night, I was hired to perform at a little girl's birthday party. The house was grand, full of lights and balloons, and I could already hear the chatter of parents and children as I walked in carrying my bag of tricks. I told myself the same thing I always did before a show. Just make them laugh. Forget everything else. Just make them laugh. I put on my best act, spinning plates, juggling colorful balls, pulling silly faces. At first, the children giggled, clapping their tiny hands, their laughter filling the room like music. But then, something shifted. I dropped a ball. My juggling slipped. My hand shook as I tried to balance a spinning plate, and it clattered to the ground. The kids laughed again, but this time not in the way I wanted. It wasn't laughter with me. It was laughter at me. I felt my chest tighten. My hands grew sweaty inside the oversized gloves. I tried to recover, pulling a balloon from my bag to twist into a dog. But the balloon popped in my hands, a sharp snap that made the kids scream and giggle louder. That's when I saw him. The father, Daniel. He was standing near the cake table, his arms crossed, his eyes narrowing. His little girl sat in his lap, watching me with a curious frown, not smiling, not laughing. "Is this your idea of entertainment?" Daniel's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The music stopped, the chatter faded, and suddenly, all eyes were on me. My heart sank. "You can't even do your job right," he snapped, his face red with anger. "Look at these kids. Half of them are bored, and the other half are laughing at your mistakes. I paid you to make this party special, not to make a fool of yourself." The room fell silent. Parents whispered behind their hands. Children stared with wide eyes. My painted smile felt heavier than ever, cracking under the weight of his words. I wanted to explain, to say the balloon popped by accident, that my hands had slipped, that I was trying my best. But no words came. My throat was dry, my tongue tight. Daniel's voice grew louder, sharper. "You call yourself a clown? You're nothing but a joke. Pathetic." The word burned into me. Pathetic. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, though my face was hidden under white paint. His daughter looked at me with confusion. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't amused. And in her innocent eyes, I saw the truth. I had failed. I gathered my things quickly, my hands trembling as I stuffed props back into my bag. The sound of whispered laughter from the parents stung more than any slap. I kept my head low, wishing I could vanish into the floor. When I reached the door, I heard Daniel's voice one last time. "Don't ever come back here. You don't belong at parties or anywhere children deserve joy." The words echoed in my head like a curse. I stepped out into the cold night air, the sound of the party muffled behind me. My painted smile smeared with sweat and shame, I walked down the street feeling smaller than I had in years. I had been insulted before, kids teasing, parents making jokes behind my back, but never like this, never so publicly, never so cruelly. By the time I reached my tiny apartment, the paint had run down my face with tears I hadn't even realized were falling. I sat in front of the cracked mirror, staring at the broken man beneath the colors, and for the first time, I asked myself, am I really nothing but a clown? That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing his voice again and again. Pathetic. You don't belong. You're a joke. Those words carved themselves into me like scars. But little did I know, that humiliation, the most painful night of my life, was also the seed of something greater. It broke me, yes, but it also planted the question that would one day change my life forever. What if I could be more than this? After that party, I carried Daniel's words with me everywhere I went. Pathetic. Joke. Don't belong. They replayed in my mind like a broken record. Every time I put on the makeup, the red nose, the big shoes, I felt the sting of those words. It was as if the costume wasn't a shield anymore. It was a reminder of everything I wasn't. Still, life didn't stop. I had bills to pay. Rent was due, and food wasn't free. So I kept performing at small birthday parties, at cheap cafes, sometimes even at parks. Children still laughed, sometimes out of joy, sometimes out of pity. But I went on. I needed the money. But every time I washed off the paint at night, the man in the mirror looked tired, broken, alone. My apartment was a small, dim place, a single room with a bed, a cracked mirror, a chair, and a tiny kitchen corner. The wallpaper peeled, and the ceiling fan squeaked when it turned. It smelled faintly of old paint and dust. Nothing about it said home. It was just a place to survive. I lived on cheap noodles, bread, and sometimes soup when I could afford it. My shoes had holes in them, and my gloves had been stitched more than once. But here's the thing about pain. It can either destroy you or push you somewhere new. And for me, slowly, it started pushing. One night, after a long, failed gig at a diner, I was walking home when I noticed a group of young men sitting in a cafe with laptops. They weren't laughing or playing. They were focused. The glow of their screens lit their faces. I caught a glimpse of numbers, charts, red and green lines. I asked the waiter later what they were doing, and he said, "Stocks. They make money sitting here, can you believe that? Buying and selling on the computer. Sometimes in a single day they make more than you'd earn in a month." The words hit me hard. More than a month in a single day. That night I couldn't stop thinking about it. Money from numbers. Money from lines on a screen. Not balloons. Not juggling. Not paint. The next day, I walked into the public library and asked about stocks. The librarian smiled kindly and showed me shelves of books. I didn't know where to start, but I grabbed one and sat for hours reading. Words like investment, dividends, and shares sounded alien at first, but slowly I began to understand. It became my secret world. Every night, after performances, I would wash off the paint, change into my worn-out clothes, and head to the library until it closed. I studied. I read about companies, markets, risks. My eyes burned from staring at pages, but my mind felt alive for the first time in years. But knowledge wasn't enough. I needed money to invest, and I barely had enough to live. So, I made sacrifices. I stopped buying little treats. I cut down on meals. I walked long distances instead of taking buses. Every coin saved went into a small jar. It took months, but finally, I had a small amount saved. Not much, just enough to buy a few shares in a company I had read about. With trembling hands, I opened an online account and made my first trade. It wasn't magic. The money didn't double overnight. Sometimes the numbers went up. Sometimes they fell, but slowly, carefully I learned. I treated every mistake as a lesson. Every small win felt like a spark of hope. And while the world still saw me as a clown, inside I was changing. The library became my second home. The old computer there became my classroom. I took notes, scribbled ideas, and listened to free lectures, online. I couldn't afford fancy courses, but knowledge was free if you were hungry enough. Of course, there were days I wanted to give up. Days when my investments went wrong and I lost half of what I had saved. On those nights, I'd sit in the dark staring at the ceiling, hearing Daniel's voice again. Pathetic. Joke. But then another voice would whisper back, "No. Not this time. Not forever." That whisper kept me going. One evening while walking home from the library, I passed by a shop selling electric bikes. They were sleek, silent, glowing with modern design. People stopped to admire them. I stood there, mesmerized. Something about them felt promising. I didn't know it then, but that moment planted another seed in my mind, a seed that would grow into something much bigger than stocks. But at that time, I was still just Evan the clown, a man with smeared makeup, a bag of tricks, and a dream too fragile to share with anyone. People laughed at me during the day, but at night, in the quiet corners of the library, I built a future nobody could see yet. It was a double life. By morning and afternoon, I was the clown, painted smile, funny shoes, balloons in hand. By evening and night, I was a student of the markets, chasing numbers, learning patience, slowly stacking bricks for something invisible but real. And even though nobody knew, even though nobody believed in me, I started to believe in myself. Just a little, enough to keep going. I had no idea where this road would take me. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't pathetic after all. After that party, I carried Daniel's words with me everywhere I went. Pathetic, joke, don't belong. They replayed in my mind like a broken record. Every time I put on the makeup, the red nose, the big shoes, I felt the sting of those words. It was as if the costume wasn't a shield anymore. It was a reminder of everything I wasn't. Still, life didn't stop. I had bills to pay. Rent was due, and food wasn't free. So I kept performing at small birthday parties, at cheap cafes, sometimes even at parks. Children still laughed, sometimes out of joy, sometimes out of pity. But I went on. I needed the money. But every time I washed off the paint at night, the man in the mirror looked tired, broken, alone. My apartment was a small, dim place, a single room with a bed, a cracked mirror, a chair, and a tiny kitchen corner. The wallpaper peeled, and the ceiling fan squeaked when it turned. It smelled faintly of old paint and dust. Nothing about it said home. It was just a place to survive. I lived on cheap noodles, bread, and sometimes soup when I could afford it. My shoes had holes in them, and my gloves had been stitched more than once. But here's the thing about pain. It can either destroy you or push you somewhere new. And for me, slowly, it started pushing. One night, after a long, failed gig at a diner, I was walking home when I noticed a group of young men sitting in a cafe with laptops. They weren't laughing or playing. They were focused. The glow of their screens lit their faces. I caught a glimpse of numbers, charts, red and green lines. I asked the waiter later what they were doing, and he said, "Stocks. They make money. Sitting here. Can you believe that? Buying and selling on the computer. Sometimes in a single day they make more than you'd earn in a month." The words hit me hard. More than a month in a single day? That night I couldn't stop thinking about it. Money from numbers, money from lines on a screen. Not balloons, not juggling, not paint. The next day, I walked into the public library and asked about stocks. The librarian smiled kindly and showed me shelves of books. I didn't know where to start, but I grabbed one and sat for hours reading. Words like investment, dividends, and shares sounded alien at first, but slowly I began to understand. It became my secret world. Every night, after performances, I would wash off the paint, change into my worn-out clothes, and head to the library until it closed. I studied. I read about companies, markets, risks. My eyes burned from staring at pages, but my mind felt alive for the first time in years. But knowledge wasn't enough. I needed money to invest, and I barely had enough to live. So, I made sacrifices. I stopped buying little treats. I cut down on meals. I walked long distances instead of taking buses. Every coin saved went into a small jar. It took months, but finally, I had a small amount saved. Not much, just enough to buy a few shares in a company I had read about. With trembling hands, I opened an online account and made my first trade. It wasn't magic. The money didn't double overnight. Sometimes the numbers went up. Sometimes they fell, but slowly, carefully, I learned. I treated every mistake as a lesson. Every small win felt like a spark of hope, and while the world still saw me as a clown, inside I was changing. The library became my second home. The old computer there became my classroom. I took notes, scribbled ideas, and listened to free lectures, online. I couldn't afford fancy courses, but knowledge was free if you were hungry enough. Of course, there were days I wanted to give up. Days when my investments went wrong, and I lost half of what I had saved. On those nights, I'd sit in the dark, staring at the ceiling, hearing Daniel's voice again. Pathetic. Joke. But then another voice would whisper back, "No. Not this time. Not forever." That whisper kept me going. One evening, while walking home from the library, I passed by a shop selling electric bikes. They were sleek, silent, glowing with modern design. People stopped to admire them. I stood there, mesmerized. Something about them felt promising. I didn't know it then, but that moment planted another seed in my mind, a seed that would grow into something much bigger than stocks. But at that time I was still just Evan the clown, a man with smeared makeup, a bag of tricks, and a dream too fragile to share with anyone. People laughed at me during the day, but at night, in the quiet corners of the library, I built a future nobody could see yet. It was a double life. By morning and afternoon, I was the clown, painted smile, funny shoes, balloons in hand. By evening and night, I was a student of the markets, chasing numbers, learning patience, slowly stacking bricks for something invisible but real. And even though nobody knew, even though nobody believed in me, I started to believe in myself. Just a little, enough to keep going. I had no idea where this road would take me. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't pathetic after all. The showroom smelled of new beginnings. Polished floors reflected the sunlight streaming in through the large glass windows, and the faint hum of electric bikes filled the air like a promise. I stood behind the counter, adjusting a display of the newest models, my mind a mixture of pride and anticipation. It had been months of hard work, studying the market, perfecting the business plan, investing wisely, and now finally, I could see the results of my labor. My heart still carried the memories of my past life as a clown, of the parties where I juggled poorly, stumbled over jokes, and had been humiliated in front of families and children. That memory, once heavy with shame, now felt like a fuel that had driven me to build something real, something I could call my own. The door chimed as someone entered. I looked up casually, ready to greet a customer, but stopped dead. There he was, the man who had humiliated me months ago, the father who had shown anger and disdain when I had failed to entertain at his daughter's party. Daniel. I could see the tension in his posture, the way he glanced around the showroom, as if he were searching for answers, trying to make sense of the place. And then, finally, his eyes landed on me. Recognition hit him like a shockwave. His jaw tightened, his lips parted slightly, and I could see the confusion mixed with disbelief in his expression. Daniel had walked in thinking he was entering just another store, just another place to purchase a bike, never imagining that the very clown he had once scolded and humiliated would now be the man in charge, the owner, the decision-maker, the one running the business. I walked toward him with a calm smile, keeping my composure. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I help you?" I asked politely, my tone steady, friendly, and confident. Inside, a storm of emotions brewed, but I kept it controlled. I wasn't here to gloat, and I certainly wasn't here to remind him of the past. This was not about revenge. This was about demonstrating growth, resilience, and success through action rather than words. Daniel cleared his throat, his voice wavering slightly. I was just looking around," he said, but I could tell from the way he avoided my gaze that he was struggling to process reality. I gestured to the bikes, offering him information about the latest models. "This is our newest line of electric bikes," I said, pointing toward a sleek, shiny model. "It has a long-lasting battery, lightweight frame, and the latest motor technology. We even offer test rides if you'd like to experience it yourself." His eyes flicked toward the bike, then back at me. I didn't know," he stammered. The shock was visible. Every word, every gesture seemed to reinforce that the person he had belittled was now someone of accomplishment, someone in control. I watched him closely, noticing the subtle signs of embarrassment, perhaps even regret, in his expressions. We walked around the showroom together. I explained the features of the bikes, the advantages of electric mobility, and even the future, plans for our company. Daniel nodded along, but I could sense the internal struggle within him. He was realizing slowly that life had shifted, that the world had changed, and that his earlier assumptions about people, about me, had been completely wrong. After a few minutes, he finally blurted out, "Wait, you..." You're the owner? His voice carried disbelief but also a hint of humility, as if he were acknowledging a hard truth he hadn't expected. I nodded with a gentle smile. Yes, sir. This is my business. We've worked hard to make it welcoming, informative, and reliable. The silence that followed was heavy but meaningful. Words were not necessary. His expression said enough. He was processing the realization that the man he had scolded at a party, the clown he had considered incompetent, was now someone who had not only rebuilt his life, but had done so with intelligence, hard work, and determination. Daniel finally spoke again, this time softer, quieter, with genuine regret. I am sorry, Evan. I shouldn't have treated you the way I did. I was wrong. His words carried weight, honesty, and a rare humility that I hadn't expected. I smiled, not the painted smile of a clown, but a real one. It's all right. Everyone has their moments, I said simply. I didn't want to make him feel worse, and I didn't want to elevate myself over him. This was not revenge. It was a lesson lived, through action. Success had spoken for me, and there was no need for bitter words. He looked around the showroom one last time, eyes lingering on the bikes, then back at me. I can't believe this. You've built all of this? He asked, almost in awe. I nodded again. Yes, it took a lot of effort, patience, and learning, but it was worth every moment. As he prepared to leave, I noticed a change. In him, the arrogance and anger that had once defined his attitude were gone. In its place was respect, a silent acknowledgement of what I had accomplished. He extended his hand hesitantly, and I shook it firmly. Thank you for showing me this, Evan, he said sincerely. I realized in that moment that success is not only measured by wealth or business achievements. It is also measured by personal growth, resilience, and the ability to rise above past pain. My journey had transformed me. The humiliation, the anger, the judgment, they had all become stepping stones, lessons that guided me toward a life I never imagined possible. Daniel left the showroom and I watched him go, a strange sense of closure settling in my chest. I returned to arranging the bikes, polishing the surfaces, and adjusting displays. But this time, every action felt lighter, freer, as if a burden had been lifted. My past and present had merged into something meaningful. The joker who once stumbled at parties, who had faced scorn and shame, had now become Evan, the man who created opportunities, who faced challenges, and who succeeded through perseverance. And so the encounter ended not with conflict, but with understanding. It was a quiet, powerful moment that reminded me of the strength hidden in humility, patience, and persistence. Life had given me a second chance, and I had embraced it fully. The showroom buzzed with potential and promise. Customers came and went, test rides were taken, deals were made, and I continued guiding everyone with knowledge, patience, and a genuine smile. But deep inside, I carried a quiet satisfaction, a sense of fulfillment that could never be shaken. I had transformed humiliation into growth, failure into success, and judgment into respect. That day, I learned that life has a strange way of balancing things. People may judge and shame you in the moment, but perseverance, intelligence, and kindness can ultimately rewrite the story. I was no longer the clown they laughed at. I was the man they would remember, the one who had risen above, quietly but undeniably. It was quiet in the showroom that afternoon. The sunlight poured in through the large windows, reflecting off the sleek surfaces of the electric bikes. I was rearranging a row of helmets when I noticed Daniel lingering near the entrance, hesitating as if he didn't quite know how to begin. There was a subtle tension in the air, a pause filled with unspoken thoughts, and I felt a small smile tug at the corner of my lips. Life had a way of surprising people, and moments like these reminded me just how far I had come. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice was cautious, almost hesitant. "Evan, he began, then paused. He glanced around, avoiding my eyes, but I could feel the weight of his gaze trying to measure who I had become. In that pause, I realized something important. He was seeing me, not as a clown in a costume, a performer who had once stumbled and embarrassed himself, but as a man who had created something substantial, something real. I approached him calmly and said, "Yes, sir. You can call me Evan. I run the showroom now." My tone was gentle, without a trace of bitterness. I wanted him to understand that this wasn't about revenge or humiliation. It was about growth, about showing what perseverance and focus could achieve. He finally looked at me directly, and in his eyes I saw a mixture of disbelief, respect, and, perhaps, the beginnings of regret. I didn't expect you. His words faltered, and I could see his mind racing to reconcile the image of the clown he had once scolded with the man standing confidently in front of him now. I led him through the showroom, showing him the latest models of electric bikes, their sleek frames glinting under the sunlight, their designs reflecting both innovation and care. As I explained each feature, the long-lasting battery, the lightweight yet sturdy frame, the cutting-edge motor technology, I could see his surprise growing. This wasn't just a business, it was a vision, a product of planning, learning, and careful execution. Daniel stopped by one of the bikes and hesitated before speaking again. "I can't believe... you did all this?" His tone carried awe, and I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not the kind that comes from showing off, but the deep, calm satisfaction that comes from proving to yourself that hard work and determination matter more than anyone's judgment or anger. I nodded simply. Yes. It took time, effort, and a lot of learning from mistakes, but it was worth it. This isn't just a showroom, it's an example of what's possible when you don't give up. My voice carried no prideful arrogance, only a steady honesty. He looked around again, taking in the details, the polished floors, the neatly arranged bikes, the customers trying out the models, and the atmosphere that felt professional yet welcoming. I noticed the subtle change in him, the shift from disbelief to understanding, the beginning of recognition that the man he had once scolded had not only moved on, but had thrived. Finally, he spoke, and this time his words came with a weight that was impossible to ignore. "Evan, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have treated you that way at my daughter's party. I was wrong to scold you in front of everyone, to humiliate you. I underestimated you." There it was, the acknowledgement I had quietly hoped for, though I never needed it to feel satisfied. His apology was genuine, unforced, and it carried the humility of someone realizing that life doesn't always go the way we expect. I smiled, not out of mockery or triumph, but out of understanding. It's all right. Everyone has moments they regret. What matters is what you do afterward. I wanted him to know that life wasn't about dwelling on past mistakes, but about recognizing growth, learning, and moving forward. He hesitated for a moment, then extended his hand, a simple gesture but one that felt profound. I shook it firmly, silently acknowledging the bridge between the past and the present. That handshake wasn't about power, pride, or revenge. It was about recognition, understanding, and closure. As he left, I felt a sense of calm and fulfillment wash over me. There was no gloating, no bitterness, only the quiet joy that comes from knowing you've faced challenges, endured humiliation, and turned it into strength. The joker who once fumbled at parties, who had been scolded and mocked, had become Evan, a man capable of creating success through persistence, intelligence, and resilience. Watching him leave, I realized something important. Success is not only measured by wealth or status. It is also measured by the ability to transform your life, to rise above judgment, and to inspire recognition in others, not through confrontation, but through action. The man who had humiliated me was now someone who understood the journey I had taken. He didn't need to say more. His respect was evident in the way he carried himself, the way he glanced back at the showroom before stepping out. Returning to my work, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The showroom, the bikes, the customers, All of it represented more than business. It represented growth, transformation, and the ability to rewrite the story of one's life. Every challenge, every humiliation, every mistake had been a stepping stone, and every step had brought me to this point. In that moment, I understood fully that recognition doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from resilience, action, and the quiet confidence of knowing your worth. The world will judge, anger will flare, and mistakes will happen, but what matters most is how you respond, how you build, and how you grow. Daniel's apology was more than words. It was a mirror, reflecting the journey I had undertaken. And as I watched the sunlight glinting off the bikes, I knew that the joker who once stumbled and fell had become someone far stronger, wiser, and more capable. The story wasn't just about me. It was about life's way of showing that perseverance and determination always find their reward. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the hum of electric bikes and the promise of new beginnings, I felt truly at peace. I never thought life would take me from juggling balloons and painting smiles on children's faces to running a business that people actually respected. Back then, I was just Evan, the clown everyone hired for parties, cafes, and small events. I had my red nose, my oversized shoes, and my bag of tricks that could make even the crankiest toddler giggle. I loved my work truly, because laughter was my world, but it wasn't a world that everyone appreciated. One chilly December evening, I had been hired for a birthday party in a cozy hall near the city park. The room was decorated with colorful balloons and sparkling lights, and little faces lit up with excitement as I stepped in. But that day, something went wrong. I can't even say exactly what happened. Maybe my juggling went a bit off, maybe my tricks were a little sloppy, but the father of the birthday girl didn't see it as a mistake. He saw it as a failure. He was a tall man, with a presence that made everyone in the room shrink a little. When I fumbled with the magic wand, he didn't wait. He shouted in front of everyone that I was incompetent, that I wasn't worth the money they paid me. His voice was sharp, almost cutting, and the tiny birthday girl's smile froze. I felt a mix of embarrassment and anger, but mostly shame. I was just trying to bring joy, and in that moment it felt like the world was laughing at me, not with me. After that night, I avoided thinking about him. I carried on my work, doing my best to forget the harsh words, but they lingered. It was strange. Sometimes humiliation can burn so deeply that it becomes a strange kind of fuel. For me, it became motivation. I decided that I wouldn't let anyone ever belittle me again. I couldn't control what people thought in those moments, but I could control my future. I started reading. I read about money, investments, and business. I began putting small amounts into stocks and learning how to make my money grow. Every time I invested, it was like juggling again. Careful, patient, learning from mistakes, and always trying to improve. Slowly, I started seeing results. My small investments grew, and with that growth came confidence. I wasn't just a clown anymore. I was someone who understood value, someone who could take risks and earn rewards. It didn't happen overnight. There were days when I questioned myself, nights when I lay awake wondering if I was chasing a dream that would never materialize. But I kept going. I even began networking, meeting people who were into business and entrepreneurship, learning the ropes, understanding how to manage money and resources. Then came the idea that would change everything. I could combine my love for excitement and my new business skills. That's how the EV bike showroom came to life. I partnered with a friend I met through my new business circles. Together, we created a small showroom for electric bikes in the heart of the city. I wanted it to be sleek, welcoming, and fun. A place that reflected my personality without the clown costume. We started modestly, but I made sure every detail was perfect. The bikes were top quality, the staff trained well, and I even added a little corner where kids could play while their parents explored our showroom. Somehow, in that space, I had managed to combine the joy of my past with the ambition of my present. Then one day, something completely unexpected happened. The same man from that terrible birthday party walked into my showroom. I recognized him immediately. His eyes scanned the bikes, but his expression shifted when he finally looked up and saw me. not in a red nose or floppy shoes, but in a crisp shirt, confident, and in control of a business. I saw shock flicker across his face, followed by recognition, and then something I never expected. Regret. He walked toward me cautiously. "Evan?" he asked, almost whispering. "Is it really you?" I nodded, a small smile playing on my lips. He seemed nervous, embarrassed, and for the first time I noticed he was smaller somehow. Not in stature, but in the arrogance that once filled the room. He started apologizing for that party, for shouting at me, for humiliating me in front of his daughter and everyone else. I listened quietly, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and forgiveness. Life had come full circle, in a way that no red nose or painted smile could ever have imagined. I never imagined that one moment of humiliation could follow me for so long, like a shadow I couldn't shake. It all started with that fateful birthday party. I, Evan, the Joker, whose job was to bring laughter and joy, had stumbled in front of a room full of people, and the father of the little girl had made sure I remembered it. His anger had been sharp, public, and relentless. At the time, I felt powerless. The laughter I had carried like a shield seemed to vanish in a heartbeat, replaced by embarrassment and shame. I wanted to disappear into the shadows. For weeks afterward, I replayed that moment in my mind, wondering if I had truly failed, or if the failure existed only in his eyes. But then something inside me shifted. I realized that life didn't have to be measured by a single moment, or by the judgment of someone who didn't understand me. I started thinking bigger. If I couldn't make him respect me as a clown, maybe I could make him respect me as something far more powerful. I threw myself into learning. I studied investments, the stock market, and how businesses grew. I poured every penny I had saved from my Joker gigs into stocks, sometimes winning, sometimes losing. But every failure was a lesson. I learned patience, strategy, and timing, the very skills I had once used to juggle and entertain, now applied to money and opportunity. Slowly, I began to see progress. My small investments started multiplying, and with that growth came confidence. I felt for the first time that I could control my own destiny. The idea of opening an electric vehicle showroom came unexpectedly. I had been following the rising trend of sustainable transport, realizing that EV bikes were not just the future. They were a chance to combine profit with purpose. I partnered with a trusted friend, and we launched a small but elegant showroom in the heart of the city. Every detail was perfect. The bikes gleamed under the lights, the staff were trained and courteous, and I even incorporated a playful corner for children, a subtle nod to my past life as a Joker. I wanted this place to be more than a business. It had to feel alive, vibrant, and welcoming. Months passed, and the showroom began to attract attention. People loved the bikes, appreciated the service, and I enjoyed the satisfaction of building something tangible. Yet part of me never forgot the man who had humiliated me. I didn't seek revenge in the traditional sense. No pranks, no schemes. But I carried a quiet hope that one day fate would allow him to see me differently. I wanted him to witness the life I had created, the respect I had earned, and the man I had become. Then, the day came, unexpected and surreal. The same man walked into my showroom, browsing the bikes casually at first, but with an unmistakable air of authority. I could see the surprise in his eyes when he recognized me. Gone were the oversized shoes and painted face. In their place was a man in a sharp shirt, calm and confident, running a successful business. The realization hit him hard. He had come to buy an EV bike for his daughter, and here I was, the Joker who had once failed in his eyes, now the very person controlling the place. He froze, his arrogance replaced by shock and something that looked like guilt. "Evan?" he asked hesitantly, like testing reality. "Is it really you?" I nodded slowly, a small controlled smile on my face. For the first time, I saw the weight of regret on his shoulders. He started apologizing, stammering through words about how he had treated me unfairly, how he had let anger dictate his actions. It was strange hearing him, and yet, a part of me had always wanted this. Hearing him acknowledge the pain he caused, and seeing him recognize my transformation. I didn't mock him. and I didn't demand his apology. Instead, I guided him patiently, helping him choose the perfect EV bike, showing him the features, answering his questions with professionalism and patience. There was no chaos, no laughter-filled distractions, just business, competence, and calm authority. With each passing moment, I felt the satisfaction of quiet triumph. The humiliation of that party was no longer mine. It had been transformed into my strength, my motivation, and ultimately my success. By the time he left with the bike, he shook my hand, his eyes sincere. He said, "I am sorry for everything I said that day. I had no right." I smiled warmly, understanding that the power of success and dignity often speaks louder than anger or revenge. That moment was more than vindication. It was a lesson in patience, resilience, and transformation. Life had offered me a chance to rewrite the narrative, not through cruelty or payback, but through achievement and integrity. Reflecting on it now, I see that revenge isn't always about retribution or making someone feel small. Sometimes it's about growing beyond the humiliation, creating a life that no one can mock, and letting the proof of your success speak for itself. The joker who once fumbled at a birthday party had become a man of respect and influence. And the man who had shamed me? He left not with the satisfaction of revenge, but with the realization that life had a different plan, a plan that gave me the dignity and success I had always deserved. In the end, the lesson was simple, yet powerful. Don't waste energy on anger or retaliation. Focus on building your life, honing your skills, and creating success. Time has a way of showing who truly deserves respect and who merely had a fleeting moment of power.